You are watching WPTV.
Welcome back to the virtual desk. You know, it's been a long offseason already in the MLB. We've already had some things going on. But to put us in the hot stove today, we have Steven, Joe, and Anthony Walker. You know, New York's a big place. Everybody knows New York. It's one of the meccas of everything, basketball, baseball, even football to an extent. But the Mets have been known as the little brother in town. But Steve Cohen, he made a big acquisition of the Mets. He's got a lot of money. And Steve, I'm gonna start with you. Do you think that Steve Cohen can make the Mets a contender in the next 3 years?
Oh, absolutely. And only one word is the reason for that, and that's money. We're coming into an off season where a lot of teams are crying bankrupt. You know, Joe, you and I spoke about this, over the past couple of weeks, and Steve Cohen is the only owner. He's worth $14.7 billion. And these free agents, they don't understand that teams don't have the money. So they're going to request high contracts with lots of annual salary. And the Mets are the only team that can really give that. So if the Mets are able to corral like two of maybe the top 3 or 4 free agents, which I think is definitely a real possibility, we could see the Mets hoist a trophy in the next couple of years.
It's going to be interesting to see because I know Met fans have been waiting for it for a long time. 1986 has been a long time. None of us were even thoughts in 1986. So it's been a long time since the Mets have seen some success. Anthony, do you think that not even the next 3 years, because this offseason is pretty big for them with a lot of free agents, do you think they can make a big push next year?
I really think they do. When you look at this Mets team, they're really not that far off. They have some really solid pieces in the factor of J.D. Davis. You know, Michael Conforto had a big year. Jeff McNeil is going to do what he does. Pete Alonso had a little bit of a sophomore slump. I expect him to bounce back nicely. And then they still got Jacob deGrom. They got Noah Syndergaard coming back. And if you add a guy like Bauer, a guy like Realmuto, a guy like Springer to that mix, that only makes them a little bit better. And who knows, maybe a Francisco Lindor trade's coming up in the works too. So there you go.
You never know. That's scary. That just to hear that thought's a little scary. Hey JP, what do you think? Because I know you're a fan of some players on the Mets, so I know this put a little bit of a smile on your face a little bit.
The Mets. The next 3 years are going to be a orange and dark blue parade in New York City. It's time for the Mets' reign of dominance in New York City. I really think that outside of actual New York teams, so not the football teams, not anyone in Brooklyn, but any team that's actually in New York, I would be most excited to be a Mets fan right now. I think just the fact that there's just a new culture. It's fun to be a Met now. It's going to be the cool thing to be a Met. And I mean, Stevie Cohen's got a great sense of humor. Great guy. And I mean, we're looking at a franchise that's actually devoted to putting cash to put players on the field. I mean, that's unheard of now. It's unheard of.
Yeah, Marcus Stroman he opted back into his contract. He didn't have to. He could have walked, got some money for agency, but he liked Steve Cohen enough. He even said it. He liked the culture enough that he was able to stay. And speaking of people who have been opting out and being free agents, you know, it's been a big free agency already. No big deals have really gone down yet. But Joe, I'll start with you. Who do you think is the best free agent on the market, and where do you think that he's going to end up?
I think best free agent on the market is a guy from New York, DJ LeMahieu. If you look at his batting average the last few years, 364 in 2020, almost made a run at the batting title last year. I mean, the guy does nothing but get hits, and he's a lockdown.
He rakes. Dude rakes.
Lockdown defensive second baseman. You could play him at third. You could play him at first. Perennial MVP candidate. Career 305 hitter. You're not going to get a guy who's this consistent and this much of a lock at the top of your lineup anywhere else in this free agent class.
Steve?
I'm going to go a little off the radar here. I'm going to go with a guy with like George Springer there, Joe. 5-tool player for the Astros. You know, he's been homegrown for them for a while, and, you know, he wants a new change. We're talking about a guy that could hit for power from the leadoff position, which we rarely see in the game today. The guy who has speed, can steal bags, has a great glove there in center field, and probably not going to be requiring that much money like a LeMahieu or Trevor Bauer. Probably, you know, pretty sizable contract. But I do think Springer leaves the Astros, and I really, really do think he ends up in the orange and blue with the Mets.
It's a big possibility. He opted out of his contract, so yeah, it's very possible. Anthony?
Steve, I got your back on this one. I love George Springer this offseason. we're looking at a guy that kind of had a little bit of a down year, but picked it up towards the end. He finished the month of September with he hit 316 the month of September with a 380 on base percentage. We're also talking about a guy that has dominated time and time again in the postseason. He's played 63 games in the postseason. He has 19 home runs to his credit. He has a 269 average and a 349 on base percentage.
If I'm not mistaken, he has the most leadoff home runs
exactly
in the playoffs.
And also, I think this guy is going to end up in Toronto. The Blue Jays are ready to contend. They have some young pieces, and adding Springer will only elevate that.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting pickup for Toronto because Toronto's a young team, and with some juggernauts in the AL East, I think it will be a good pickup to get George Springer. But something that happens year round. This is one of the biggest things about baseball, and this is for people of the past. The Hall of Fame ballots were just released. Anthony, do we see anyone making it? Because there's been some cases where people don't make it.
I think we're going to have one of those cases this year. If you look at the previous years, we got a lot of players that are still towards the lower part of their ballot or the lower part of them being on the ballot. There are a lot of guys in their third year, fourth year, fifth year. Normally we see guys, if they do get in, they get in towards the later years, unless they're really, really a top tier player in the game. I think Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are going to continue to make that push towards the 75% marker. But other than that, I don't really see a case where you have a player, make the Hall of Fame this year. And that's kind of sad, but I mean, it's the way it goes.
Yeah, it is very sad to see that. And in particular, the case of the two people you just named, I think it's even more particular sad. Steve, what you got?
Yeah, I think unless the MLB really wants to let in the steroid era class, there's really no huge names that pop out to you. Like obviously last year was luckily you had Derek Jeter, but unless you let him Bonds or Clemens, not really. I don't think anyone goes in.
Joe?
I think this year we're going to see 3 new members of the Hall of Fame class. The first 2 have already been mentioned here today. It is the year for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens to finally make the push into the Hall. With Bonds, we are talking about a guy who is one of the all-time greats, if not, dare I say, the greatest hitter of all time. Regardless,
he got walked with the bases loaded. I think that just says it enough right there.
Unbelievable. Roger Clemens, one of the most dominant pitchers of the last 70 years. So I think those 2 have a good shot. And on top of that, I think that if you take a good hard look at the resume of Torrey Hunter and what he was able to do in Minnesota and then with the Angels, I think that he has a realistic shot. Maybe not this year, but I think he can be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and speaking of those 2 names, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, both very controversial names. And you go from controversy to controversy. Alex Cora and AJ Hinch have jobs. And earlier this year, they were outed for the cheating scandal that happened in Houston, but they have jobs again. Just like that, just at the snap of a finger. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this? Because I think it's blasphemy. These guys,
I cannot stand it personally. I think the second the penalties came out, for not even Alex Cora, but mainly AJ Hinch, that the penalties were weak because you knew that that teams would be able to see past the cheating and hire a guy like AJ Hinch back. And that took literally 5 days into the offseason for Hinch to get a job back.
Yep. And Cora was shortly after him as well.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think it's awful that you're kind of opening the door for cheating. Because if you cheat and win a championship, who cares if you get fired, or who cares if you have to get suspended for a year? Because then you could just get brought back the next year after that. I think it kind of glorifies it in a way, and I think it's awful for the game.
Steve and Joe, quickly, what are you guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, especially for Cora in his case, because it's reported that he was literally the ringleader of all this, that it was his idea. He kind of manufactured everything. So I think it's kind of BS that he just gets to walk right back into the game with not even less than a slap on the wrist. Guy gets a 60-game vacation.
I'm okay. I think they did their time. They served their time.
Joe, you're okay. You're usually the one to slander people, but you're okay with this.
These guys have done their time. They have faced punishment from the league.
Have they, though?
Don't get all soft on us now, Joe.
You can't.
Less than a year.
Time, though?
It hasn't even been a year.
If you want to be upset at the MLB because the
well, that's fair too.
The Red Sox did exactly what they were supposed to do. They gave him a year and then they hired him. That's it. They were well within the rules to get hired.
Well, that's just a controversial topic. Oh, we'll see how they do. Alex Cora's back with the Red Sox, so the Yankees will see him a few times, and I know the Yankees will be excited for that. But that's all we have for the Diamond this week. Coming up next, we have a breakdown of a fun Thursday night matchup in the NFL. Stick around here on WP Sports Desk.